Thank you very much, Heather. Yeah, and in Texas, it requires you to have a license in order to consult or repair or design, install irrigation. And so when I moved back to Texas from Colorado, I did obtain the irrigation license. So I am a licensed irrigator here in the state of Texas. And what I'm going to talk to you tonight about is smart controllers. And you're either on this because you already have a smart controller or you're thinking about purchasing one. So hopefully I'm going to give you some tips that you can use to either decide to purchase one or set up the one that you currently have. So with that, I'm just going to kind of get started here. If it's going to go. There we go. Okay, so let me talk just a little bit briefly about sprinkler controllers in general. So if you have a in-ground automatic irrigation system, then you already have a controller right now using it. And it could be a variety of brands, a variety of styles, but basically they all kind of do the same thing. They have a control box. A lot of times that's found in the garage. It sends an electronic signal because that is actually plugged into an electric source. And it is sending an electric signal down wires to valves to tell that valve to open and close. And once it opens, then your sprinklers come on. So that's kind of a very quick, what does a controller and a sprinkler system, how does it work? So all controllers, basically, whether or not they're smart or they are just the regular controller that's been on the wall for a long time, all they do is regulate when and how long your sprinklers run, and it is all dependent upon the watering schedule you enter. An automatic controller, if it is set properly, is usually much more efficient than operating your sprinklers manually. It's a lot more efficient than those that put out sprinklers attached to a hose, unless you're putting some sort of timer on them, because typically you'll turn it on and forget about it, and that wastes quite a bit of water. So automatic systems can be more efficient if they are set properly. And that's a big if they're set properly, because there's a lot of things that can happen with the controllers if they're not set properly. Okay, big question that I always get from people is, how long do I run my sprinklers? And that's regardless of whether they have a smart controller or a regular controller. But there is not one answer. You need to know that the runtime on your sprinkler, it depends on a lot of things. The first thing is what's called the precipitation rate. And each sprinkler type, whether it's a spray, a rotor, a drip, a rotary nozzle, a valve zone of sprinklers has a precipitation rate. It's usually expressed in inches per hour. And that's going to tell you the first item you need to know is how fast is that water coming out of that device. The next thing you need to know is the plant type, the soil type. Is it in full sun? Is it in shade? And then what is the climate during the year? And the climate does change from day to day. As you're aware of our 104-degree temperature today, it can be very, very extreme, especially in the summertime. And this is called ET. ET is the evapotranspiration rate. So that is the evaporation rate of the soil and the transpiration of the plant. And that's what determines ET. And it's all determined upon how much wind there is, how much sun there is, what's the temperature, etc. So it does it, and then what plant type it is. So let's just talk a little bit about smart controllers. There are a ton of them out there on the market. And in fact, if you just do a Google search for smart controller, you'll probably come up with about 20 different brands. Some you may heard of, some you may not have heard of. But one thing you need to do before you decide to purchase a smart controller is decide what it is that you need, and then decide how much you're willing to spend on it and how much is it going to do for you. Most of these smart controllers tout that they're going to save you 30 to 50% of the water. And if your determination of buying a smart controller is based on that marketing technique, then you need to know this, is that that savings that they're touting is based on a regular controller that is sitting on the garage wall, and you never make changes on it. You keep it on all the time. You never turn it off. You don't have a rain and freeze sensor that turns it off. And you pretty much run it your 2 days per week, every single week. And so the smart controllers, that 30 to 50% that you're saving on those is typically coming from somebody who does not make any changes to their controller all the way through the year. Because where the smart controller saves is really in the fall, winter, and spring. In the summer, when we're like today with 104, it's not going to save you. As a matter of fact, it may run longer than what you normally would run it, just because it is basing that runtime on the current conditions of the temperatures and wind and things like that. Now, there's two different types of controllers out there. There's a lot of them that say they're smart and they're marketing as smart. However, some of them only give the capability of using the app on the phone to turn it on, to turn it off, and program. They may connect to a weather station, but they'll only change according to what you already have programmed. I call these semi-smart because they're not going to tell you how much runtime to put in it. And if you just put 10 minutes in there and it decides to adjust it down, you may not be watering quite enough. So that's why I'm saying they're semi-smart. That there are other controllers, several of them market themselves as smart controllers, and they will automatically program a schedule based on the sprinkler type, your sunshade conditions, the plant and soil type, the slope, etc. They usually do normally connect to a weather station, and they may change that schedule monthly by the historic ET. I call these smarter. Okay, so they're smarter, but are they really that smart? So a lot of this has to do with what you do with that controller once you have it installed. So older controllers, these are still around. So you might still see these on older systems. They don't have the capability of running multiple programs. They don't really, all they can really do is you're going to put a time that it starts, a day that it's going to work, which you can put several days on it. And then each station is going to have minutes that you're going to move these little dials to the minutes. They're not quite sophisticated enough to do like your drip zones on one day and your sprays on another. They're just not sophisticated enough to do that. There are some older controllers that basically have only the ability to water every day, every other day, or odd or even, but they cannot choose the day. And if you're in a municipality that only allows you 2 days per week and you have got a set day, then these old style controllers may not suit you for what you're needing. And I've seen a lot of these out here since all the water restrictions started, where people have to upgrade their system simply because their old controller will not abide by the water restrictions. And that could be a reason for choosing a smart controller. So one thing that both the semi-smart and the smarter controllers, they all typically have a sprinkler control with a phone app. And that is a huge advantage. Even if you're not worried about all the smart features and everything else, the advantage to that is being able to turn on that zone and look at it. If you suspect that might be a broken head or there's something wrong with it, you know, it's pretty easy to walk out there where that side comes on and just turn it on and just visually inspect it. So it does have a little bit of advantage, because if you have an old controller that's in the garage that you have to go to the garage and turn on a zone and then walk all the way around the yard to see if it's running, see if there's a broken head, then run back to the controller and turn it off, and do this multiple times in all those zones, then in that smart controller and the Spone app can help you avoid what's called sprinkler sprints. It's a great little exercise, but it's one of the advantages of a smart controller is that you're able to go right into that zone and turn it on and look at it. And what I find is that people that do have smart controllers tend to check their system a lot more often than those that don't. And this may be one of the reasons why, because they don't want to do the sprinkler sprints. So that's a good advantage with a smart controller, whether it's a semi-smart or a smarter controller. Almost all of them have a phone app that you can use to turn these on and off. Some of them also integrate with other things like Alexa and Google and other items that you might have. So if you've got other smart devices in your house already, a lot of these do integrate with those as well. I think you've probably seen commercials where the guy is telling Alexa to turn the sprinkler on and as somebody's walking by. So sometimes they become a little toy, and even though they might become a little toy, it does tend to make people check their sprinklers a lot more often with a smart control. So, and by doing that, checking that more often, then hopefully you are avoiding waterways. Most of the time our sprinkler systems are going off between midnight and 6 a.m. and we may be sleeping and we don't know that we've got broken sprinkler heads or broken pipes or just inefficient systems. So having the smart controller with that device to be able to go out and check it kind of helps to avoid some of this water waste. Now, like Heather said, one of the reasons for doing these programs is to help conserve water. All right. And I will tell you, a broken sprinkler head can be wasting up to 15, 16 gallons per minute or more. So that's quite a bit of waste if you have your zone set for 20-minute runtime. Okay, so besides smart controllers, there's a lot of other devices that are out there that are touted water-wise. One of the reasons why the irrigation industry has started making and manufacturing these products is because of the need to conserve water. Irrigation will be one of the things that will be cut off in times of severe drought or water shortages. So the industry has come out with a lot of different devices. Some of them are smart controllers, but there are also things like new devices in drip systems, in nozzles, soil moisture sensors, and flow sensors. There's all kinds of things that are out there to help you be water wise. And the whole reason for it is for water conservation. In fact, one of the first smart controllers that came out was by Weathermatic. Weathermatic came out with SmartLine. It was the winner of the new product contest for the Irrigation Association in 2004. That's 20 years ago. So they've been around for a while, smart controllers have. And since they came out with it, then there's a lot of other companies that have come out. Some of them are irrigation manufacturer companies. Some of them are tech companies. So you could have this one is called Skydrop, there's Rain Machine, there's Ratio. Those are all by tech type companies. Orbit Beehive Orbit has other irrigation products besides a controller. And then HydroWise, these are just examples. So HydroWise is by Hunter, and they are one of the major manufacturers of irrigation equipment. So I will tell you that there's all types of controllers out there, but before you decide to purchase one, you need to really research and see what each one of them does, because they may be smart, and but they may not be exactly what it is that you're wanting. I'm going to focus the next few slides of this on two of the products that are the most, I'd say, popular or most installed that I see installed in North Texas. One of them is the Orbit Beehive, and the other one is a Ratio. These two are the ones that I see the most in North Texas, and I see issues with them where they weren't set up correctly. So I kind of want to spend some time on making sure that if you purchase a product like this, that it is set up correctly so that it will give you the benefit that you're looking for. Orbit Beehive basically has two different styles here. You can see one, it's just a plate. You don't see much. It's mainly run with the app. The other one is the same product, but it has the standard controller look, and it has a screen where you can touch and dials and things that you can do. Ratio has this one little thing here where you can basically scroll through to test your zones, but the rest of it is going to be done on the app itself. So it just depends on what it is you want. Some people really want to be able to touch those dials in the garage, or they have a landscaper that they want to be able to let them touch the dials and things like that. So they want this product. But it's kind of up to you how what it is that you want and what your needs are. So these are the two I'm going to focus on and go through some things that I see that maybe are not set up correctly. So we'll start with Orbit. Oh, I guess before I do that, the whole reason for this title, Be Smarter Than Your Smart Controller, is that these controllers really are not that smart. Really, the only person that is smarter in the room is you, because you have a brain, and these are only programmed for whatever the programmer set it up for, and then your inputs to it changes how these controllers work. So you have to be smarter than these controllers so that you operate it correctly. Otherwise, they will not help you, and in fact, they may use more water than what you were expecting and make those water bills higher than what you were expecting. So that's why you have to be smarter, sorry, than the smart controller. Remember what I said, the controllers, that all they do is they just regulate how it's going to run. And how long you run it all depends on that sprinkler type, plant type, etc. So these controllers, the Ratio and the Orbit Beehive, are basically programmed according to averages, because every sprinkler is a little different. Every sprinkler zone, the way that they're laid out, and the spacing in between, the nozzles that are on them, they all can make a difference. And so they can't be exact on anything. So they have to program to the average. So talking of average, this is something you need to know whether or not you have a regular controller or a smart controller, because you need to know how long to water. So most of the time, if we are 2 days per week, which many of our municipalities and water districts only allow you to water 2 days per week. So the norm is to try to put down a ½ inch of water when you are irrigating, so that the norm general rule is 1 inch per week. However, most of our Water is Awesome and Water My Yard and some of the other items out there have really looked at ET over the years, and they don't necessarily need that full 1 inch. A lot of times they need much less than that. But we've always programmed our controllers to give 1 inch. And so therefore the smart controllers are automatically programmed to give 1 inch per week based on the average of the type of sprinkler head. You can have spray heads, you can have rotor heads, you can have rotary nozzles on a spray head, or you can have some specialty nozzles on that. But depending on what that nozzle and that head is going to have different run times. So if we look at just the spray head, The average precipitation rate, they can range 1 to 2 inches per hour, but the average is 1.5 inches per hour. And so to figure out how many minutes it needs to run, it is just a math problem. And doing the math on it, it is 20 minutes on average for that 1.5 inches to give a 1/2 inch of water. And a rotor head can range from 1/2 to 1 inch. So if we took the average 0.75 of that, which it's exactly half of 1.5, so therefore it is double the time. It's going to take 40 minutes to provide a 1/2 inch of water on a rotor zone. Now this is very important. You should never have a rotor head and a spray head on the same valve zone. And this is why. Because if you water the time that you need for the rotor, 40 minutes, you're going to drown the areas of the spray. Vice versa, if you water to meet the sprays, you're going to drought the areas of the rotor head. So this is something that the smart controller companies know, and so therefore they're doing the average runtime based on this head that you choose. And one thing about our area is that we have clay soil. And so you will need to choose that clay soil so that it will water properly, because runoff is going to occur very, very quickly. Only 7 minutes run of that 20 minutes, and you're going to have runoff on spray heads, and as little as 13 minutes in that rotor head. So obviously you can't run the entire 40 minutes and the entire 20 minutes all at one time, or you're simply going to be running water down the street, and that is a huge waste of water. So what do we do in that instance, whether or not it's a smart controller or it's your regular controller, is that you have to do what's called cycle and soak. And that is one thing that Tarrant Regional Water District and Water is Awesome does promote, is doing what's called cycle and soak. And that is to run for 7 minutes on that spray and then let it soak in, and then do a second run time after it is soaked between 30 and 60 minutes, and let it run another cycle. And then if you need a third start time, which if you needed the 20 minutes, you would need a third start time to allow that 20 minutes in order to get the 1/2 inch that you needed. If you're not signed up for the water advice, I just recommend that you do this, just simply so that you will know, well, do I really need to water that much? And then also to be smarter than your smart controller, because that controller is only doing what your inputs are, but it's also only doing what the weather conditions are, and there's things about that to make sure it's set up correctly. All right, so drip. Some people have drips and it just drip zones, and they might have some point source, which we did a talk about that a couple of weeks ago, or they might have inline emitters. Most of the drip zones that I see in the North Texas area are inline emitters. And this might be for a foundation zone, it might be for your shrub beds, it might be for your turf grass area that is in the parkway area located between the sidewalk and the street. People always want to know how long for that. A lot of times the average is 60 to 80 minutes for these inline emitters. And this is really best giving in more than 2 days per week. So a lot of municipalities allow you to run your drip zones more days than your 2 allowed days per week, but you need to check your municipality and see what the rules are for it. But if it is 3 days per week, then basically, or it not limited, the best thing to do is 3 days a week at 20 minutes or 4 days a week at 20 minutes. 20 minutes assures that this water moves through that soil and gets through that profile. So that's something to know, that you need to know before you purchase a smart controller, because the controller has presets in it, and it may be that it's watering more than what you really want. So that's why I wanted to cover that right up front. So let's just talk a little bit now about Beehive, and it doesn't matter whether or not you purchase the one that is just by the app or the one that's on the wall that has a dial. They both kind of work the exact same way. One thing, they do have smart watering feature on the Orbit Beehive. However, you have to turn it on. It's not automatically on smart watering. You do have to edit each zone and type in the correct plant, soil, sun, slope, and sprinkler type. And if you don't know these items and you just let it default, then it may not be watering correctly. It gives an automatic runtime according to that sprinkler type average. And I will tell you, it's usually 20 to 21 minutes for a spray is typically what it gives as the average. And it does auto cycle a soak according to the soil. So if you leave it as a default of a loam soil and you have clay, then it's not going to cycle soak correctly. Now this one has, on the smart watering side, it has an auto start time at 6 a.m. And it's kind of difficult to find where to change that. And I'm going to show you in just a second. But the other things that this one has to do is that if you only have 2 days per week and you have a certain day, maybe Monday, Friday are your days to water, you have to set it in the restriction area. Otherwise, this will water whatever day it wants to. And this is where I see that it goes wrong with the Orbit Beehive, that people don't set those restrictions. Now, it does have the ability to self-program and has an ABCD program just like standard controllers. But if you're buying a smart controller, you typically don't want to do this and set up those programs. But I see a lot of people do that. Maybe it's because they don't know how to turn the smart watering on or to set the restrictions so it will only water on their correct day. In these programs, you do have to manually set those zones and the station runtime and the days and the runtime. So you have to set it up just like how you would a regular controller. It will not cycle and soak, and it will not adjust the runtime, because when you put a program in it, it's going to do whatever you tell it to. It will act as a rain sensor and shut off when the threshold is observed at a weather station, but it really will not be a smart controller if you use that feature. So let's kind of look at it and what it looks like in the app. Some of you may have not seen what the app looks like, and this it may have been upgraded since I printed these pictures, but basically your app on your home screen for Orbit Beehive looks similar to this. And on this, you have a calendar, programs, zones, and My Beehive. Now, if you need to set those smart watering restrictions to be able to set your days and also to set maybe time of day restrictions, that's where you would go into My Beehive, and you're going to see device. You're going to click device detail, and then you're going to see this screen, and that's where the smart watering restrictions comes up. On this, you will have to click this, and it does have the days of the week that you can turn on and off, and also time of day. So if you wanted to omit 10 to 6, make sure that if you do omit 10 to 6, that you have your start time for your smart watering early enough to where it'll finish before 10 a.m. And that's how you're going to change that automatic time. It autos at 6 a.m. You click where it says smart watering, it tells you 6 a.m. and you can change that. 6 a.m. may be fine if you only have 4 to 5 zones, but if you have 10 or more zones, or if you have rotor zones that need to run longer, then you might need an earlier start time than 6 a.m. So you would want to change that. So you can also change weather adjustments. On the weather adjustments, one thing, it's going to automatically go to the nearest national weather station. And you do have a choice of changing that weather station. It also has thresholds. So those thresholds are going to be there. The typical default on these is if it is a 30% chance of rain or more, it will not water. If the wind is above a certain miles per hour, it will not water. So those are the type things. And then if it has had an eighth of an inch or more of rainfall, it won't water. Those are typical, but every single one of these is a little different. But you just need to know what those defaults are. So make sure you research that controller and also make adjustments as needed. Definitely you don't want the sprinklers going if it's over 20 miles an hour wind, and things like that. But an eighth of an inch may not be enough water, so you might want to adjust that to where it has to have at least a quarter of an inch or more before it would shut off. So the other thing that you have to do is you're going to have to set up your zones. So each one of these zones has to be set up. And so when you click zones, you're going to get a screen with all of your zones on there. In this, when you're setting this up, you do have the ability to name these zones. You could actually take a picture of it and put a picture in these. So when you see this, you'd know exactly what zone that was. This particular one has 6 zones, and you see that they've labeled each one. Now, on each one of these zones, they do need to be set up. So you would click zone number 1, and this is what you're going to get, zone detail. Now, if you notice, smart watering is not on. You have to physically turn each zone on to smart watering. You can't just do one. It has to, every single one of them have to be this. Now, there's a good thing about this and a bad thing about this. The bad thing is most people don't do this much work, and so therefore smart watering is never on, and they're just using the default program. Once you turn the smart watering on, this smart detail box will light up. This is important because that's where you're going to set everything up. If you notice down here, this scheduled runtime that's down here, that means that there is a program already set on this. So if you have a program set, go back to your programs and turn that program off before you set this up to smart watering. Otherwise, it's going to give you an error message and tell you that it's going to overwater because it will water both smart watering and your scheduled run times. So when you get to smart details, it's going to look similar to this. You're going to have that smart watering is on now, and you're going to have these details. These are very important that you fill in. The sprinkler count and the rainfalls, not so as important as the slope, sunlight, sprinkler type, plant type, and soil type. If you leave these blank, it is not going to work properly. So most of our areas in North Texas have clay soil. It's important that you choose clay soil so that it will cycle and soak correctly. Most of our turf grasses that we have here are warm season turf grass. And I will tell you the default on many of these smart controllers is cool season turf grass. And there is a difference in how they're watered. Cool season grasses need more water than our warm season turf grasses in our area. So you want to make sure you're choosing, when you're choosing a grass area, that you're choosing warm season turf grass. And then your sprinkler type on Orbit Beehive, you have 3 choices. You have spray, rotor, or drip. Now, if you have rotary nozzles, and let's just say one of the brand of rotary nozzles is called Hunter MP Rotators. They have the lowest precipitation rate at less than a half an inch per hour. If you had an MP rotator in this zone, then you might want to choose drip, just because drip is preset for a lower precipitation rate, so it will water longer. The sunlight, of course, is going to be sunshade and variations of that. And then the slope. If you've got a steep slope, you definitely need to note it on here because that is going to stop it from watering that full 7 minutes on a spray. It may go down to as little as 3 minutes per run time and then cycle through 7 times in order to put down 21 minutes. And that's important. That's what helps to make this a smart controller. Now let's just compare this to Ratio. Ratio is another one that is very, very popular in the area. Notice it doesn't really have much on its screen. You're going to do everything through your app. Now the features on this is they do not have ability to do an ABCD program. It is smart only, which is good. It's a smart controller. It can have unlimited programs. And this can be a hindrance to some because they may tend to make multiple programs with the same zones on it, and then it kind of messes it all up. So you can have unlimited programs, but typically what you want to do is have like sprinklers together. So in other words, if you have 3 or 4 drip zones, you might have those on a program by itself and choose only those zones into that program. And then your sprays, rotors, and rotary nozzles could have a second program. I have seen people where they put different programs. They put a morning and a night program on these, and that is not necessary on this at all. You really only need one program for whatever it is that you're watering. So whether or not it's sprays and rotors or drip, things like that, you don't want to have 2 start times. Now, maybe right now on your standard controller, you're running in the morning and you're running at night. You really don't need to do that on a standard one either. If you're running more than one time through that, like what I said with cycle and soak, those run times are back-to-back consecutive. Like you may have a 1 o'clock in the morning, a 2 o'clock in the morning, and a 3 o'clock in the morning start time, and then running through those 7 minutes on those sprays, or 13 on your rotors. So there are 3 choices for these programs, and I'll talk about those in just a second. Now you do have to edit each zone with the correct plant, soil, sun, slope, and sprinkler, just like the Orbit Beehive. And it will auto-populate that runtime according to that zone data. And that's how Orbit Beehive does as well. It does auto-populate. Now, both of them are adjustable. You can adjust it. It sometimes will give a little bit more time than what you're used to doing. Here are your program choices. You have a choice of a fixed day, a flex monthly, or flex daily. And the app will kind of tell you that if you have 2 days per week to water, that Flex Daily is not the best program to use. It will tell you to use the Fixed Daily program. But the 2-day a week will work on the Flex Daily. But let me tell you how they're run. The fixed day basically is going to run both your 2 days that you choose it, unless the weather thresholds tell it to turn off. Your flex monthly, if you do the 2 days, what I see is that it automatically just does 1 day a week. It's trying to save you water by just watering 1 day a week. The flex daily was actually programmed and designed to not have a daily day or a particular day, for you to allow it to run 7 days a week, and for it, you can have a start time basically to end before sunrise, but to let it run any day of the week. And how it's saving is that it may go up to 12 days without watering, and then it'll water the full amount. And that's kind of how it's programmed for Flex Daily to work. So that's why Flex Daily says it's the most conserving. But it is only the most conserving if you can water 7 days a week. Because 1 week it may water Monday, and then the next week it doesn't water till Friday. But if you've got only 2 days, then your fixed day may be your best program to choose. And on drip zones, if you're going to do drip and you want to run it 4 days a week, then maybe the fixed day 4 days a week is a better choice of programs, just to make sure that you are getting the water that it's needing, especially on a foundation drip zone or something like that. On that particular one, you can choose the days, and even on the drip zones, it is not going to water if the weather thresholds are such. Now, like I said, the runtime, they call it watering duration is what it's called in the app on Ratio. It is automatically, but it can be adjusted. It does automatically cycle and soak as long as when you're choosing that program, there is a button called Smart Cycle. It defaults to it being on, but you can accidentally turn it off. So make sure you have Smart Cycle turned on and you have the correct soil type and slope, and then this will automatically go through the zones based on that. And the good thing about the Smart Cycle on both Ratio and Orbit is that if you have one zone that has a steep slope and the other zones are flat slopes, this will automatically water that zone individually as needed. So it may go through that steep zone 7 times at 3 minutes, but the flat zones will only go through 3 times at 7 minutes. So that's kind of what makes these a little bit smarter. In before sunrise is the best start time on Ratio, just because it will change based on the sunrise, and it is calculated for that sunrise. Then you make sure that you don't lose any water to evaporation due to sunlight. So the only thing is that check your zones, how many you have. You might find that it needs to start on the wrong day to do that. If you have like 18 to 20 zones, then you may have to tell it to start at midnight and just give it a specific start time. So this is what the app looks like. When you're choosing the program, this is the first thing that you're going to do. When you choose that program, it's going to give you those 3 selections. Fixed, you can see it doesn't show as much savings. Flex monthly shows more, and then Flex daily shows the most. But again, the Flex daily may not work. I mean, it'll still work on the 2 days per week, but what you'll find is that it may not be saving quite as much as it would be if it could pick its own days and time. On that schedule, this is what it would look like. You can name that schedule. Here's the type. You can assign colors, and the only reason why to assign color is that if you have 2 programs and one is work on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the other one's doing Tuesday, Thursday, then you can see quickly on the calendar what program is going to be running on a certain day. So this is not that big a deal to add that, but if you wanted to, you could. This particular one is set for a Monday, Friday watering schedule, has all the zones on it. The start time is in before sunrise, and here's duration. This is the watering duration. So for all of these zones, the total time is 2 hours and 18 minutes. It also has a start and end date, but I would be real cautious about using this because it is year sensitive. Notice this is 22. If I had this as a stop November 22, then it would never start up again. So if you use this part, make sure that if you're going to use it, make sure that you go in and put start and end dates and remember to change them. This one is left at never because then they don't have to worry about it. This is when this one was installed and started, and never end dates, and it'll just continue working. So each zone has got, just like Orbit Beehive, it does have the ability to edit. When you edit it, I'll do that in just a second, it's going to bring up all of those items that you need to choose. This is always going to tell you what schedules it in. And if this zone is in more than one schedule, that can be an issue, because if it's scheduled to run on Monday, Friday, and then maybe you have another schedule and it said Monday, Friday, and they're both on, then it's going to try to run all of those schedules at one time. So you have to be careful about it. I recommend that you never have one zone in anything but one program, and that you have the total time that it needs, because it knows how to cycle and soak. So when you go to that edit, this is what you're going to say. You can name it. You can take a photo of it and upload it here. This is the generic one for turf grass. Here's the vegetation type. Got to choose warm season grass. This is a spray head zone. this clay soil, lots of sun, and a flat slope. So these are things that are important. If you do not set these, then it could be watering incorrectly. Now, a long time ago, ratio vegetation type was automatically defaulted to cool season grass, but I think they've changed that now based on zip code. But it's always something to check to see what it's defaulted and make sure you have the correct one there. So, so smart controllers, the ratio, one thing to look for. Another thing to look for is to check the weather station. Ratio automatically defaults to aggregate the stations. If you go on Water is Awesome and you look at the map of the rainfall for this last week, you will see that rain totals were different in different areas, and it usually is. I mean, we could get 3 inches in Denton and get absolutely nothing in Tarrant County. So it's, you know, it all depends. And if they're aggregating those stations, and some, you're right on the border of Tarrant and Denton County or Tarrant and Dallas County, they could be aggregating those thresholds, and it may water when you've got rain, or vice versa, not water when you didn't get any rain. So you do have a choice. You can choose a weather station. Ratio does have the ability to choose a personal weather station. I would caution you on personal weather stations is that they are typically in somebody's backyard, and if they are not monitoring it and maintaining it, it could be giving you false reading. Look to see if you have a national weather station close to you, find out what the letters are for that. Ratio is automatically going to put the closest one at the top. So it's going to put that closest weather station at the top, and if you choose that one, then that's where it's going to get its weather data. Also check the weather thresholds. Like I said, I think it defaults to 1/8 of an inch. You might want it to be 1/4 of an inch or something like that. Also check the watering duration in the schedule after you set it up, because it's going to automatically, depending on the month, it's going to give the maximum that it needs for that month. Each month it's going to auto adjust time on historical data, and it's always on the first of the month. You will get a notification the first of each month that will tell you that it has been adjusted. It's not going to tell you how it adjusted, it's going to tell you it adjusted. That's your clue to go in and look at that app to see what the watering. Last August in particular, because we had an usually hot and dry, Ratio bumped those sprinklers up from the normal 21 minutes to 28 minutes on each zone, just based on the fact that it was hotter than what the historical data was. And sometimes that can happen as well. And maybe you don't want to water over a full inch. Most of the time you need less than it. This week on Water is Awesome, it says in some areas up to 3/4 of an inch. Orbit Beehive, again, check the weather station and threshold, but make sure that in that, when you're checking the watering duration in Orbit Beehive, it is going to be in zone detail, not in schedule. Ratio is in the schedule. It'll say watering duration, you can make your changes. For Orbit, you have to go to each zone and check. There is what's called a adjustment area on there. You're going to click that adjustment and the watering adjustment, and then you're going to look at the duration that it's set for, and you can adjust that down or up depending on what you need for that zone. Also double check that no programs are scheduled along with smart watering, because it will water both. The difference with Orbit, now if you have drip zones you want to run more than 2 days per week, you can have drip zones on a schedule A, B, C, or D, and have the smart watering feature turned off on the zone, and then water it 3 or 4 days a week at a set time. So that's the difference. Whereas you can have a different program with Ratio, you'll have to do drip zones with one of the A, B, C, D programs, and make sure that you've got it scheduled for the right amount of time. So Like I said, these are the ones that are the most popular. There are others out there. I'm not promoting one over the other. I'm not promoting these over any of the others that you can purchase. But what I want you to do is make sure that if you do purchase a smart controller, that you research that controller and you find what you need to do to set it up properly, because the defaults on these may not be what you need or what you want, and they may not be saving you water if they're not set up correctly. So like I said, the big advantage is having it at the palm of your hand. That is so that you can go out and check those sprinklers and check them often. A good time to do it is on the weekend when you're just getting up in the morning. Walk out there, turn those zones on, check for broken heads, check for leaks, things like that. Flag those leaks and fix them, because that is what's going to help save water, and save water for Tarrant Regional, but also for the North Texas. So remember this, who is smarter? You are smarter than your smart controller, as long as you make sure that things are set up the way that they need to be. So with that, I know I was kind of quick, but I could probably speak another hour on it, and I don't have time. So with that, if there's any questions that I can help to answer, Heather, I'd be glad to do that in the next 5 minutes.
Sure. Thank you so much, Gail. That was super informative. If anyone has any questions for Gail, you can type them now into the Q&A box and Gail will answer them. Right now, we don't have any questions yet, but let's give everyone maybe like a minute or so if they want to type. I do want to mention that the WaterSense brand, right? Like many of these sprinkler controllers are going to be that WaterSense, not brand, but certificate label. There you go.
Yes, and that's one thing to know. Just because it says WaterSense does not make it a smart controller. It's a designation that has been put on that controller, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be super smart and you can just plug it in and forget it.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are WaterSense controllers, right, that are regular controllers and not smart at all. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions, so I guess maybe you answered everyone's questions. Oh, wait, hold on. We've got one maybe. Oh, someone is just asking if the presentation is going to be recorded. So yes, everyone, it is being recorded right now. And I will send the recording out to everyone once it is uploaded. It will probably be within the next month or so. All
Like I
right.
said, I didn't have time to
Yeah.
cover them all, but just realize every single one of them has got specific items that you need to know to make sure it's set correctly.
And we do have one question that just came in. So I know that you talked about most of the most common brands. Was there a Rainbird smart controller that you talked about?
No, I Hydro wise, but I didn't have Rainbird up there. I had Rainbird as the regular controller. Rainbird
Gotcha.
is touting their ESP TM2 as a smart controller. It's a semi-smart controller. So if you remember what I said, the semi-smart controller, it
Mhm.
doesn't have the ability to automatically program it for you with the timing. So you're going to have to set that all up yourself. It will adjust according to weather data and turn it off. And it does have weather thresholds and weather stations. It does have to hook to Wi-Fi. And so that's the other issue I didn't say. But you need to make sure that where your controller is located, that you have got a good Wi-Fi signal. That is the other thing I forgot to add, because if you don't have a good Wi-Fi signal, they're not going to work.
Right, definitely. If it doesn't get all the way like out to your garage, I guess, right?
Yes. Yeah. So the
Yep.
best way to do that is turn on your Wi-Fi on your phone and check where your controller is located, and look and see how many bars you have on your phone on that Wi-Fi. You want to make sure you've got a good Wi-Fi signal.
Yeah, that's a good tip to have because I didn't even think about that. And I think that my Wi-Fi is pretty bad in my garage and it's not even that far from my Wi-Fi router. So good idea to check that. Okay. Well, I think that is all the questions. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Thank you so much, Gail, for sharing all of your wisdom with us about the smart controllers. And
You're
everyone,
welcome.
have a great night.
All right, thank you.